George Findlay from LexisNexis. I head up the corporate section of LexisNexis. So this is a product and a world and a space that's really close to my heart. Today's webinar is the first of a limited edition, which we've coined as the Winter Webinar series. And we'll be hosting a sequence of series over the next couple of months, focusing on different industries, specific industries, looking at the law, governance, risk, compliance, procurement, employee reference checking, and so on within different industries. So please keep a lookout for invitations that might be specific to your type of industry, and I'm sure we would be able to assist you. So let's get on to today's session. So if you're part of a small team handling governance, risk, and compliance in your organization, or you might have outgrown spreadsheets, but you're not quite ready for a fully fledged GRC platform, then today's webinar is aimed right at you. So we'll be focusing on building GRC maturity for smaller teams and showing you how to access flexible support, and of course, that won't break the bank. So let's hope that the session will be useful for you today. Before I introduce you to our two speakers, just a little bit of admin. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there are two little tabs. The one is called chat, and you'll see there are already some people that have greeted and said hello there under the chat. And then there's Q&A. So during the session, please feel free to ask your questions at the Q&A. My colleague Sade and I will answer those questions on the fly as they come in, or if there are certain questions that might be repeating themselves, we will address those towards the end together with our panelists so that everybody can share in that Q&A. So please feel free to use that in the duration of the talk. You will also see during the two different talks, there will also be polls that are put up, so please partake in those polls. It's very important for us to be able to track and analyze the questions as stated in those polls. But let's move on to our speakers for today. So first up is going to be Stephen Ndlovu. Stephen is the founder of Gacheni Advisory. He's an admitted attorney of the High Court of South Africa with an LLB from Pretoria, an LLM from KZN, an MDP from the University of Stellenbosch Business School, and is a certified compliance officer with the CPRAC. His company is known as Gacheni Advisory, where he offers public and private sector organizations accessible, affordable, and flexible compliance and legal advisory services. Stephen, it really is a privilege to have you join us today and to have someone of your caliber to share your thoughts and ideas. Following Stephen, we're going to have Natasha Kistan. Natasha is a Lexis GRC consultant at LexisNexis, and she's responsible for advising and implementing LexisNexis bespoke GRC systems for clients and then providing training as well as ongoing support. Natasha has 16 years of experience in the financial services industry, and over the latter part of her career has gained knowledge and skill with respect to compliance, risk analysis, and risk management. So those are our two esteemed speakers today. First up, however, is Stephen. Stephen, most welcome. It is a privilege to have you here today. I'm going to put my microphone on mute and put my camera off and hand over to you. And again, just to emphasize, please make sure of the Q&A and also take part in the poll that Stephen will introduce during the course of his talk. Stephen, thank you very much, and over to you.
George, thank you so much for that introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending. I understand that you all have busy schedules, so it really means a lot to us that you are attending in this session, and hopefully it will be a fruitful session, but also one that's filled with engagement. So the topic is building a GRC maturity, and I enjoy this topic because it's not merely a topic, but it's something that's very relevant for all of us who are attending this morning. So when we're talking about GRC maturity, I want us to consider the different categories of compliance maturity. So the first category is siloed and inconsistent, which is least mature. The second category is organized but reactive. Third category is actively managed and proactive. And the fourth category is fully integrated and embedded, which is the most mature. I just want to contextualize these categories. So, for example, every organization should have a compliance risk appetite. And depending on the industry that you're in, you'll set your compliance risk appetite accordingly, and management will be responsible for formulating that, but the board will be ultimately accountable for signing off on that compliance risk appetite. So these categories really speak to the relevance and the significance of your compliance risk appetite. For example, if your compliance risk appetite is low, then you should be aiming for a fully integrated and embedded, which is most mature. That's the category that you should be aiming for. But we understand that Rome wasn't built in one night. You've got to start somewhere. So even if you're starting at siloed and inconsistent, which is least mature, there's nothing wrong with that, because you can see that there's a lot of opportunity for you to get to organized and then actively managed and then to get to fully integrated. And I just want to share with you and just take you in my confidence that when I started with my first compliance job, which was in a listed logistics company, I was tasked with building the compliance function. And at that time, obviously we were at siloed and inconsistent, which is least mature. And all that I had in front of me was a compliance policy, but that was very useful. But I'd like to believe that by the time I had completed my mandate, we were at least at an actively managed and proactive. So that's just to give you some confidence and some comfort that even if you start at siloed and inconsistent, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because you can improve on that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like for us to actually do a poll so that you can tell us which category you believe you fall into. Do you fall into siloed and inconsistent, organized but reactive, actively managed and proactive, or fully integrated and embedded? Ladies and gentlemen, please participate in the poll as best as you can, and then obviously at a later stage we can discuss those results. I'm just going to give you a bit of time to complete that poll.
The results are on screen.
Okay, so are the results complete?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for that. That's been a very good session of participation. We see there that at siloed and inconsistent, that's 29% of you. That's siloed and inconsistent, which is least mature. In terms of the category of organized but reactive, we see 51%. That's very impressive. There's actively managed and proactive, 12%. Fully integrated and embedded, 8%. So that's most mature, 8%. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for participating in that. And I just want to analyze these statistics very quickly. So siloed and inconsistent with 29%, it's quite a high percentage. But as I said, there's still opportunity for you to improve that. And I would put the argument up that the reason why there's a least mature in many organizations, 29%, is that some of the compliance basics are not yet fully embedded in the organization. But once the compliance basics are fully embedded, then you'll be able to move from siloed and inconsistent to organized but reactive. You see there at organized and reactive, 51%. So that means in terms of the execution of the compliance basics, many of you are getting that right. And you'll find that all you need is just a bit more time to execute on those compliance basics so that you can move from organized but reactive to actively managed and proactive. So talking about the issue of compliance basics, you really need to ensure that you've got policies in place and that you stick to those policies and that you run with those policies. Remember, if there's no compliance policy in place, then there's nothing to guide you in terms of your compliance approach. There's nothing to guide you on what management should be responsible for on a daily basis. And there's nothing, for example, to talk to your compliance reporting requirements. And if those aspects are missing, it's very difficult for you to improve your GRC processes or your compliance processes. Well-considered policies and frameworks will add value, and we believe that a compliance policy is the best place to start at. Remember when I shared that story with you when I was first a compliance officer in a logistics company, the first document that I had in front of me was a compliance policy. And to build my compliance program and to build my monitoring plans and so on, I always referred back to that compliance policy. And most importantly, there was a paragraph that said, and every quarter, I'm going to have to report to the company secretary, and then I'm going to have to report to the board. So I ensured that by the time I'm required to report to the board and the compliance and the company secretary, I've done all the necessary groundwork in terms of my compliance reviews, etc., identifying instances of non-compliance and so on. So I ended up doing that on a continuous basis for a number of years, and things got better and better. But you've got to execute the basics, and you've got to do so on a consistent basis. So, ladies and gentlemen, to assist you in the execution of those basics, there's a process called the 4-phase compliance process, and that's taken from the generally accepted compliance practice framework. And you see a circle here because a circle goes round and round. It doesn't really have an end point. So the first thing that I would suggest that you do, ladies and gentlemen, is to develop a compliance universe. And it sounds so obvious and it sounds so silly, but still till this day, many of the organizations that appoint us to assist them with compliance, they either don't have a compliance universe, or the compliance universe that they have is outdated. So for example, there's critical pieces of legislation that are applicable to the organization that are not referenced in that compliance universe. So number one, start with that compliance universe, and that's a nice quick win for you. Then once you've identified your compliance universe, in other words, you've identified the legislation that applies to your organization, then you need to embark on the process of doing a compliance risk assessment to understand, now that, for example, we've identified the Occupational Health and Safety Act, what are the key provisions in that act that apply to our organization that we need to comply with? For example, in terms of Section 8, you need to do a risk assessment in terms of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So you can identify that as a compliance risk, as something that you need to do, but that you haven't done. POPI is also another good example. Things like doing your personal information impact assessment, your compliance framework, and so on. Those are nice aspects to identify as part of your compliance risk assessment, and you can immediately start to work on those so that you can address your compliance risks. And then at number 3, you can develop a compliance risk management plan to talk to all the legislation that applies to your organization and to map the risks in accordance with that legislation. A compliance risk management plan, I like to say the best place to start with that document is on an Excel spreadsheet, contrary to popular belief, because once you become mature in managing a compliance risk management plan, you can then take that data and you can move it on a system such as the GRC, which we'll get into more detail about a bit later. And then very important, ladies and gentlemen, to do your regular or quarterly compliance monitoring and be able to identify instances of non-compliance with key legislation, being able to table recommendations to senior management and the board, and being able to write a compliance report to the board to tell them, for example, during Q1 of 2022, these are the pieces of legislation that we looked at. These are the compliance gaps that we identified. These are the recommendations that we tabled. These are the responsible people for dealing with those recommendations and closing those gaps. And by such and such a date, we would have closed those gaps, because that's what the board wants to understand. They want to understand where do we stand in terms of our current status on compliance with all the things that apply to us. Where are we? Are we red? Are we orange, or are we green? Is everything good? That's what they want to know. But you need to be able to give that answer in a way that shows that you've applied your mind, that you've got a methodology that you follow. And on the basis of that methodology, you are able to say that for Poppy, we are orange because we've got many gaps. But when it comes to the Insurance Act and it comes to occupational health and safety, we are green because we've got all the relevant controls in place and we are complying with the relevant compliance obligations. So ladies and gentlemen, that's very important for you to understand as part of your basics package, that you follow this 4-step process that's outlined in the Generally Accepted Compliance Practice Framework. So let's assume you've now mastered the basics and you've mastered those 4 steps. Then what must happen next? And I'll tell you what must happen next. So you need to migrate the data. When I talk about data, I mean your compliance monitoring plans, the results of your compliance reviews, your compliance risk management plans. You need to migrate all of that onto a LexisNexis GRC system. And you might ask me, but why should I do that? And the answer is as follows. So compliance is an ongoing process. Every quarter, you're going to have to report to the board. On a daily basis, there might be someone within your organization who's asking a compliance-related question, and you need to be able to answer in an authoritative manner. And how do you answer in an authoritative manner? You answer in an authoritative manner by having all the information at your fingertips, and also being able to access a system that has additional information that you can talk to. So that when someone asks you a compliance-related question, you go to your LexisNexis GRC system, you pull the information, and you make it readily available. You save time, and time is money, as we all know, ladies and gentlemen. And another reason why you should follow this approach is that as your organization grows, so will the compliance volume grow. And as the compliance volume grows, you'll all agree that it becomes very difficult to locate where information is sitting. You've got reports that are sitting over here. You've got compliance risk management plans sitting over there. Some of them are outdated. You've got compliance policies. Some of them are outdated. They're still referring to King 3 when they should be referring to King 4, etc. So with a GRC system, you can plug all the relevant compliance information, updated information, and you can plug it into the system. So all that work that you do up front, it's not without an end goal. You do all that work so you can eventually get yourself to a point where you can take all the work and you can put it on a system and you can make your life easier. And on the point of making your life easier, we need to really think compliance management and not death by compliance. It's critical. So my idea of compliance management is an endpoint where you've got a dashboard and all you literally do is you sit down and you prioritize all your red and your orange areas. In other words, all your medium to high risks. On a daily basis, you're prioritizing those and you're understanding what can we do to reduce those risks. And you're working on more strategic issues such as improving your controls, introducing new controls, etc. I don't want you, ladies and gentlemen, to run around like headless chickens. I want you to be in control of compliance through compliance management. And the only way to do that, as I've said, is to master the basics. Once you've mastered the basics, follow that 4-step process that I've shared with you. And once you have all the data from the basics and your 4-step process, You take all the data, you plug it into Lexis GRC, and then you're able to be in control of the situation and execute compliance management, not death by compliance. Let's look at some of the issues or the hurdles in adopting, for example, a GRC system or similar software. So one of the issues is that you might go to the person in charge, be that the CEO or the CFO or the company secretary, and you say, I would really like for us to start using a GRC system. But then the problem is you can't articulate a cost-benefit analysis. In other words, if the organization were to procure the system, what would be the benefit be for the organization from a cost perspective? So you're unable to articulate that. And I understand it's a difficult discussion to have. The other point is that you may struggle to evidence the data that you have that justifies that the organization procure the system. But if you are able to show that you've got working papers, you've got compliance, you've got a compliance policy, you've got a compliance monitoring plan, you've got compliance reports, and you've got outcomes from the compliance reports, but now you need to house all that information in the system, then I think the conversation becomes easier, it becomes more rational, because you're saying to your organization, you've done the legwork, you've collated the information, you've done the reviews, you've understood the data, but now you need a place to house the data. So you should think of packaging your request to senior management in that fashion. Start with your cost benefit analysis, and then from there you go to talking about all the work that you've done, all the reports that you've compiled, the policies that you've written, etc. But now you need assistance in housing that information, and you need assistance with becoming a compliance manager who's in control of compliance. So ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the end of my session. I'd now like to introduce you to my colleague, Natasha, who's the GRC system consultant. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm just going to take a second and I'm going to start sharing my own presentation as well. And thank you, George, for the introductions earlier as well. Just give me 1 second and we will start sharing screen. So thank you so much for that. Thank you, Stephen. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing. We often find in our roles that we don't often get the opportunity to apply our minds to our knowledge base, or even for that matter to even add to our knowledge base. And this really just gives us an opportunity to take a step back and for us to just gauge where we are, and for us to be inspired by the lecture and by the talk that you've given us. And if you've been inspired, like I have been inspired with Stephen's lecture, then already you are thinking about action items that you want to deliver in your own organization. And at the same time, as you're starting to add so many things to your to-do list, you probably animatedly are already hearing the screeching brakes of, where am I going to find the time to do this? Am I going to have enough resources to carry this to fruition? Or even for the fact that, you might be fatigued already through the process. I think the poll was really interesting in terms of where everyone gauged themselves in the, in the different levels or in the different stages of the journey of where they are with the GRC system. And I think that's important in putting to perspective of where you are, and to put into perspective your plans, and also to put into perspective of where you want to be in relation to your GRC system. So my brief is really to take some of those verbs and some of those action plans and really just to calm it down and to put a little bit of a visual in front of you to show you that the plans and the actions and the items that you want to put into play in your organization is not as daunting as what it seems. So the first thing with regards to the Lexis GRC system is its features and its functionality will suit any level of maturity in your organization. And this has actually been achieved by different modules being set in the Lexis GRC system. So this is just a little bit of a reminder as regards to the different levels of maturity. And if I then layer that over with regards to our Lexis GRC system, you will see that the various modules that are in place and some of those to-do action items that you saw speak to the different levels of maturity. So whether you are, for example, just at the beginning of your compliance management, or whether you are in your legal universe and registers as a starting place for policies and for legislation, moving on to aspects with regards to risk and management, is emulating an entire enterprise risk management together with compliance risk management, moving on to auditing, review, gap analysis, and even taking the entire system and stitching it into, for example, your occupational hygiene, your incident management, or even for that matter, your HIRA. And the best part with regards to these systems, and perhaps any other system that you may be involved in as well, is that it's not a big bang approach. It really is about you and your vision around what your Lexis GRC system or your compliance management system is, and how, in fact, from a GRC perspective, from an operational GRC perspective, from a services GRC perspective, because that's exactly what you are, how you can mirror or how you can marry your vision into the vision of your organization. All right. So on the next slide, I'm already taking you through to aspects with regards to your Lexis GRC system. So I just want to go back and show you some information with regards to your different modules that you have in place. And sorry that I'm moving through it so quickly. I just need to put a different setting on my system. All right. So we spoke about the different modules, the different levels of maturity, the different levels that you are in your GRC journey. And on the next item, I spoke about an item in relation to your vision. So for your vision, as an example, and I want to stop here because I get a little bit bolshy when it comes to the topic of do I need a GRC system or don't, and how do I motivate a GRC system in my environment. I get bolshy from the perspective of then saying, well, you know, in the perspective of where you're doing your finance work, in the perspective of where you're doing your operational work, in the perspective of where you're doing your sales work. You have your sales system, you have your SAP system as an example, you have your you have your finance systems as an example, and all of those tools that you have in your business and in the various other operational business make for good, efficient, professional, and masterful work. And what it actually allows you to do is that it allows you to add value to your organization. And in addition to adding value to your organization by achieving your business objectives. So if that level of system, or if that level of systems is available to the rest of the business, then surely it's not a grudge purchase for your business, but it's a must-have for your business, because it puts together that function of governance, risk, and compliance as it does in any operational business for that matter. Okay. So in particular, Stephen mentioned starting with the basics. And one of the basic items that he's mentioned is a well-considered policy as a starting point with regards to your Lexis GRC journey. And we deal with these policies on a day-to-day basis. All right. So what the Lexis GRC system can give you right at the onset is a legal universe and a register. Now, what this legal universe and register does is that it immediately creates a level of efficiency for you. Because to start with a good policy, you need to start with a good piece of legislation. And that piece of legislation, well, let's make that piece of legislation well considered. Let's make that policy that we're going to write from our pieces of legislation as well considered. And in order for us, for those pieces to be well considered and to be well written, we need to actually enrich the information with regards to our policies and enrich the information from the context of our organizations. And that can be done by adding in the information that you come across in your day-to-day business with your organization in an efficient way that will carry through not only for right now, but will also carry through for you to be able to pick up and start it on your journey at any point in your journey throughout your GRC maturity. So today I'm highlighting something that's recent in our legislative sphere, and that is the Cybercrimes Act. So one of the things that we do in the Lexis GRC system is that we will provide you with, or provision you in your bespoke library with copies of legislation that's pertinent to your business. As an example, the Cybercrimes Act is the one that I'm bringing forward and showing you now. We then take that piece of legislation and we provide the efficiency for you in terms of breaking it down into its various tools for verbatim, plain language, a own plain language section, as well as audit questions. So some of the work in relation to understanding and enriching your pieces of legislation, adding into your policy, is already efficiently carried out for you in your Lexis GRC content that we provide on your GRC system. So as an example, I'm looking at section 16 of the Cybercrimes Act. And as you can see, it will have verbatim, it will have plain language, it will have items in relation to audit questions as well. In addition to the Lexis GRC system, here's an example with regards to the question set that we have on the system. On the next item, the other thing that I can do is in relation to my related content item. So from my related content and from my section or from my legislation that I'm dealing with in the Cybercrimes Act, I'm already considering how that piece or how those pieces of legislation or sections of legislation then add into a particular policy. And in this case, you can already see that my enriched information contains all of that information on the policy, but the tool set also allows me to make reference to a policy in relation to that particular piece of legislation. And that is, in this example, my cell phone policy, which may indeed relate to the intimate images section that comes through from your Cybercrimes Act. On the next slide, you will see that in addition to housing your actual legislation, we've also allowed on our library system on GRC for you to house the actual policies. And by clicking on the item on the related content, you can also access in your library the cell phone policy in particular. And that would allow you to continually add information on related contents as well as on remarks. On this slide, we've taken it to another level. So in addition to information that I've pulled out for verbatim, for plain language, for other information with regards to audit questions already built into your system, I'm also adding in information with regards to how can I best adopt a policy or what should better be in a policy. And that's my research work that I've taken and put under my remarks and content section. And the idea around this is that I don't need to keep coming back to the same item, or if somebody else comes into the business, they are then able to pick off where another consultant has perhaps left off with regards to your Lexis GRC understanding and your Lexis GRC content and the context of your organization as well. So I love summaries. I just want to take you back to some of the items that we've dealt with in relation to the library aspect. The library aspect of the Lexis GRC system already puts you in the forefront of content. And that content is in relation to your pieces of legislation, which make up your verbatim, your plain language, as well as your audit questions. In addition to that, you will also be able to relate content in relation to policy work that you would be building into your company, in relation to research work that you would be adding into the context of your organization, or any other aspects of the context into your organization, into the tool set that is available there. And the point of the matter is that when you've built that policy that Stephen mentioned, you're going to be building a really great policy. In addition, Stephen also mentioned aspects with regards to compliance risk management and compliance risk management plans. And if you know what we're referring to in the way of CRMPs, which is the compliance risk management plan, then the discussion topic that I've gone through in the first part, and particularly in relation to the verbatim, the plain language, and the audit question, you would already see that there is a build when I'm considering my aspects of the policy, that it is actually going to add into, or in fact, it's going to populate into items in relation to completing the compliance risk management plan as well. There we go. Beautiful flow. Part 1, looking at your legislation, looking at your policy. Part 2, you've done that work. That work flows beautifully into compliance risk management plans and compliance risk management actions that will flow out of there. So your compliance risk management plan, and as you can see here on the right-hand side, you can see that your compliance risk management plan pulls the data with regards to the Lexis GRC system. And as it pulls the data with regards to the Lexis GRC system, you are in fact at the start of your Excel spreadsheets in a very professional and a very efficient manner. Anywhere in your journey, your CRMPs are pulled out from the information that you're working on a day-to-day basis in your organization. So other aspects that we have with regards to these other aspects that we have that you will remember with regards to it, and I'm just going to show you and highlight those aspects, is on that library item, we referenced previously, or I referenced previously, your verbatim, your plain language, and your audit questions. And look at this item. There we go. We have a risk section as well. And on that risk sections, you can see that the emergence of the CRMP being built straight off into your library. And then your full risk assessment in your risk module is then completed, where you would complete a full risk assessment as well. So your aspects with regards to your policy, your aspects with regards to your legislation, and your aspects with regards to your CRMP at the start of your journey is dealt with on your Lexis GRC system. And I remind you as well that it's modular based. So the library is a module, and the compliance risk management plan is a module if you're at that phase. And the enterprise risk management module that is integrated for the entire business, if you're at that stage as well, and you want to have your compliance risk management and enterprise risk management integrated, that's available to you in the enterprise risk management module. And if we want to take a step further into your journey, this is a sample with regards to your risk register module. If you want to take it even further and you want to do that continuous review that Stephen mentioned before, then all of the audit questions that we have for the library is then taken and put into a concise module for you to do reviews, auditing, or even gap analysis. My clients tend to use this, as a matter of fact, sometimes right at the beginning, because the audit questions that we have in relation to that has been built on a piece of legislation like POPI as an example, or even the Cybercrimes Act as an example, make for a great module in terms of doing a gap analysis in your organization. There afterwards, and here as an example with regards to what you can do with a question set coming forward from all of those questions that have been built off of your library and conducting a review or a gap analysis. So Stephen then spoke about your compliance as an ongoing process. And certainly when you look at the modules that you have for the Lexis GRC system, you get that, the continuous management of your GRC system. And the great thing with regards to it is, regardless of where you are in your journey, is that the modules that I've showcased to you now is not the only modules that you'll generally tend to have on the systems. they are supported by the dashboards. So regardless of where you are in your journey, you can leverage off good management information coming off of your dashboards. And these dashboards that we have, or the documents image system that we have, or even for that matter, the task action modules that we have, are great value adds that are free on top of the normal GRC systems, such as the library, such as your auditing module, such as your enterprise risk module. Those are value adds that we give and that we make sure that is available on your system, regardless of your journey. And the point of the matter is that wherever you are in your journey, we can assist you with a great system to make sure that you have the necessary resources, that we put you in the front of the journey, that we do so with ease, that you can do so with good quality, and so that you can do so with a level of efficiency in your organization as well. Okay. Sample for you and just a little bit of a taste with regards to different modules, how they come together. Simple items that my clients enjoy is, for example, being able to track those action items in your environment. Simple items as well is being able to link to items on your top 10 risks, or even items with regards to what's on your schedule for the period of time. So there you go. I'll remind you with regards to Stephen's item to think compliance management and not death by compliance. And the GRC system, if it could just give you a moment just to breathe through and just a visual for you to see how those items came together and how those items flowed. And for a moment, it doesn't seem like such a mammoth task. It's just one item at a time that you need to consider in your environment to strengthen the controls into your environment and bring you to a good consistency for compliance and risk management. Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions that we're going through?
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Natasha. That was seriously insightful. Let me see if I can get my camera back on again. There we go. Natasha, thank you so much, and thank you to Stephen as well. For taking us through the basics of building maturity as a smaller team and showcasing how seamlessly it can all come together to manage our compliance and risk. If I think of Stephen's presentation, he made reference of the GRC maturity and the barriers to entry. And then Natasha, listening to you about using the correct tools and centralized data are essential to the journey. But, I listened to the two of you and I imagine industries, no matter what the type of industry is, and I picture these board packs being put together for excos and the scurrying for information before an exco meeting. But if you run a proper GRC system, you've got access to that information at your fingertips, and that mad rush before the exco meeting goes away. Those questions that happen at that exco meeting goes away, because if you ask yourself what happens at those exco meetings, you have all these committees and they all really revolve around different portions and different aspects of governance, risk, and compliance. So I find it really, really exciting that technology can bring the tools to our disposal to make our lives ordered, simple, and compliant. And that I find really, really exciting. The thing that does happen, of course, is in the back of all our minds, of all our attendees here today, we think cost, and we worry about cost because we think that these GRC tools can be quite expensive, especially if your team is constrained and you've got some budget constraints. Now, the nice thing, which we saw a little bit in Natasha's presentation, is how LexisNexis has been able to tailor make this GRC platform for the type, not just your type or nature of your business, but also the size of your business. And that to me is really, really exciting. I get almost lyrical about legal registers. I just think it's really an exciting thing, is looking at a type of industry, identifying the legal register, simplifying the language of that legal register, and then exposing what the risks are in terms of that legislation. I often, within the context of my colleagues here at the office, if there's someone who needs to be introduced to GRC or the concept of a legal register, I always give the example that all of us as individuals have a legal register. If I look at, for instance, Natasha, I would say to Natasha, what is your legal register as an individual? And then I get these blank looks. And then once we start analyzing a few things, then I would say, well, Natasha is a woman, she is married, she is of maturity, and she has children, and she pays tax, and she pays UIF, and she drives on the road. And that in itself exposes Natasha's legal register. And that's exactly what we do, is if we look at the nature of your business, we analyze your legal register and then identify the risks. And I find it really exciting. And Natasha, thanks for exposing that as well. And Stephen, certainly for your insights as well. So, like I said, we've done the groundwork for identifying the most frequently used modules for different industries. One of the questions that came up in the Q&A down below was a single practitioner asking, what is the basics that he or she may need for their practice? Now, I don't know, I'm assuming that's legal practice, but that is open to analysis. And like my little example that I gave of Natasha as an individual who has a legal register, so too the single practitioner would have a legal register, whether it's the Attorneys Act or the Legal Practice Council and the regulations related to the Legal Practice Council, or maybe your local attorney association within the province within which you work. All of those things form part of your own individual legal register and the register of your business. But the point of what I'm saying is, we can help you in that analysis. We can help you in identifying that, and we can tailor make your GRC platform and the modules you require for your system. It's not you must take all of it. We can. The solution is now that we've done the groundwork and we're making it available to everybody. So if you want to know more about how we can help you and how we can tailor make a GRC system for you for the specific type of industry that you're in, we can certainly help you. There's a poll that's going to come up now, which I'm going to ask if you can just say yes or no, whether we can give you a ring and we can tailor make something for you. Anything, whether it be from survey modules through to whatever your requirements might be. So I'm going to leave that up for a little while. And thank you so much for those of you that can then complete that poll for us. So I'm just going to give that a couple of seconds. Let me just check with my colleague here if there are any other questions we need to address. Stephen, you've got your hand up. Yes, Stephen.
Yes, George, I hope you don't mind, but you raised something so important, and the way you packaged it is also very, it makes it make sense, where you said, for example, Natasha in her daily life, these are the risks that she's exposed to, and therefore that's her legal register. So in the context of many organizations, you find that an organization has now identified, for example, this is a live example, 420 pieces of legislation. Now, surely it cannot be that organization is actually, from a risk management perspective, exposed to those 420 pieces of legislation. So that's where the GR system also helps you, because you need to lessen the scope of what you're looking at. It can't be 420. It's probably a different number, and you need to analyze in the legislation that you identify what is actually important to us, because I see many organizations identifying legislation that's not applicable to them, and also identifying compliance obligations that just don't apply to the organization. So that's wasted energy, and that's why people get anxious about compliance because there's so much information that shouldn't be there to begin with. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you, George.
No, absolutely, Stephen. I think that's spot on. I always imagine people going to bed at night and thinking, what is going to trip me up tomorrow morning with respect to compliance? And I think if you've got a proper system doing exactly what you're saying now, is identifying the risks, and it's identified in plain language for you, that you won't be tripped up in the morning. And absolutely, if I think the plethora of legislation that there is out there, and to be able to narrow it down to your industry is absolutely of paramount importance. Yeah. Thank you, Stephen, for that input. I think that brings us, let me just check with my colleague if there's anything else we need to address. I think we're pretty much covered. That brings us to the end of our session, and I just really want to thank you again, Stephen, for your insightful input. Natasha, likewise, we're colleagues, and I really, really appreciate what you showed us today. And one of the things I said to my colleague today, sitting next to me here as well, is today we spoke about GRC, governance, risk and compliance, in a very generic way. When I gave my introduction, I said to you that we're going to be hosting a series of webinars over the next couple of months in which we're going to focus on specific industries. So keep a lookout for those, because then we will look at specific legal registers so that we can identify what those risks could be and what those legal registers look like and how we can help you within your own industry. So look out for those as well, please. So those invites will be heading in your direction. So that really wraps it up for us. To all the attendees today, I mean, we were just short of 100. That is a fantastic turnout. I really, really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and coming to listen to us. Those that have completed the polls, the 2 polls, the initial one that Stephen brought up and then my later one, I really appreciate that a lot. And thank you very much. I think I've brought you back 5 minutes of time this morning. Thank you very much to our attendees, Stephen and Natasha, and all the best. Goodbye.
Thank you, George. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George.